The transfer portal opened today. There are some, myself included, who thought that and think that this is going to be a really big deal. In fact, I've been on record, as some of you have pointed out today, over the past few weeks, is talking about how this period could be more active than any single transfer portal window period that we've seen to date in the sport. Now, this is still a pretty young concept. So half of the sport didn't fall off a cliff today. So what happened? Were you clickbaiting us? Were you just overhyping? Well, no, that didn't break out today. I will readily admit to you, I thought by sundown of the first day we would have several bigger names in the portal than we already have. Now, I will also honestly tell you I'm glad that we don't, but that's not what you're here for. You're not here for me to tell you I'm happy I'm wrong. You're here for me to tell you I was wrong. I'm not quite sure I'm ready to do that yet. So, a couple of things that are happening right now. Number one, I'm very cautious about this because we're less than 24 hours into the spring window being open. Number two, I am keenly aware of how much back channeling and how much feeling out there has been today. That's nothing official. That doesn't mean a kid goes in the portal. And honestly, we could have 50 guys reach out to Pate State about feelers and about what you could offer. If the kid doesn't go in the portal, the kid doesn't go in the portal. So that's happening. I think that collectives have done an excellent job of getting out ahead of this. And to be honest, that's not just a this cycle thing. That's a last few cycles thing. So I still think there's a lot of movement coming here. I mean, we had Tennessee's top tackler go in the portal. Colorado's had a ton of movement. I think the kid from Pitt, Dayan Hayes, who I'll talk about in a second, I think that's a pretty big story, although he's not a superstar nationally known name. There's been some movement today. There wasn't that headline grabber. Caden Proctor's already back at Alabama after like 15 minutes at Iowa. So it's not like we had tumbleweeds blowing down the portal streets, like some stuff has happened. I also want to remind you, we've got several big name programs that have spring games, not last Saturday, but this coming Saturday. There's going to be movement, guys. Now, I will tell you, as I've said, I think a few times, I have thought and still continue to think that there's some pretty big movement coming. I don't want there to be big movement. So if there's a thing that happens in this calendar year of college football where I have to sit here and tell you, man, I whiffed on that one, I kind of hope it's this. I won't hesitate to tell you if it happens. I don't care. I do know that some people in our industry took it upon themselves to accuse us of doing some things and trafficking in some practices that we don't traffic in here. You know, attention grabbing, clickbaiting. Yeah, no, that's not really us. I think our track record speaks for itself on that. But I did notice. Those people won't be mentioned tonight, but I did notice. But hey, if we're wrong on this, we're wrong on this. And if this particular thing I'm wrong on, I happen to be happy about it. I'm not sure we're wrong just yet on it. So keep a bookmark on that. Number two, as Mima always said, don't count your roster before the portal closes. We got a lot of teams with spring games coming up this weekend. I think there's a lot of back channeling going on right now. I think that there's leverage that's in play here. You know, the strategy person to person and player to player that a lot of guys have is really interesting. And you always get feedback on that after the case. That G5 churn, though, which is inevitable. You know, when you have the state of college football as it is right now, you're going to have G5 rosters get rated case to case. That's kind of happening right now. I do at least notice that there's another side to this. It's a much uglier side. And it's the side where if you're entering a more professionalized era of college football, that also means some dudes are getting cut. Just call it like it is. There's some guys being told in no uncertain terms, there's not a spot here for you anymore. You should probably explore the portal. You can call it whatever you want to. Those are called cuts, at least where I come from. Those are called cuts. Well, here's the thing. You may be a 2 or a 3 in the SEC. That may mean you go start at certainly an FCS program, but many G5s and some lower level P5s as well. What I'm saying is you're going to have some big time talent walk out the door of the G5 ranks and elevate to whatever you want to call the P4 these days. You're also going to have a pretty plentiful supply going the other direction. You don't have to love that. I certainly don't. But that's kind of an is what it is proposition right now. And I guess what I would say about that is it could be a lot worse. You could be losing your guys and there's no recourse. There is no other action that you can take. You're just stuck with it. So we had Proctor move back to Bama. That was expected. Elijah Herring was Tennessee's leading tackler, and yet he goes into the portal. And in Knoxville, I don't think it was a huge shock. They don't want to lose his brother, but I don't think it was a huge shock that they lost him. Cormani McLean went in at Colorado today. That seemed like oil and water from the outset. I mean, Deion called that kid out before they even played game one, week one last year about his practice habit. So that wasn't very surprising. But here's where my mind is at on this. Day one was not as active as I thought it would be. Fingers crossed, that just means this period is going to be inactive. I could do without that kind of traffic, contrary to popular belief. Point two, I'm not quite sure we're out of the woods on that. I think that there probably are still some fairly sizable dominoes to fall. And I'm just telling you, anytime I've shared opinion about this on this show, it's not because I conjured it up out of thin air. I'm articulating what a lot of folks inside of various football programs and athletic departments have told me. So maybe it was their worst fears that they told me, and maybe those worst fears aren't going to be realized. And if so, it's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But the conditions are still favorable. I mentioned storm chasing at the outset because it's my favorite hobby outside of college football. Look, we identify areas where the parameters are in place, and we go set up, and we hope for the best. We don't hope for property damage, loss of life. Hopefully you have stuff happen out in the middle of an unpopulated field, but you can't guarantee anything. You just know which parameters mean business. The parameters are in place in college football for the next 2 and some odd weeks. Doesn't mean fireworks are going to go off. Just means if they do, this would be the time that they do.